Do YouTube channels like friendlyjordies produce journalism in the eyes of the law? Is Jordan Shanks a journalist according to the law? In this video, I'm going to answer these questions, at least in terms of shield laws in Australia. So, what are shield laws? These are laws that are designed to protect journalists' sources. So if there's a confidential informant that gives information to a journalist, so a confidential whistleblower, the shield laws are supposed to stop that journalist from being forced to give up the identity of the informant. So how is this relevant to YouTubers, friendlyjordies, for example? Let's have a look at one of the videos. This video is about alleged criminal activity or political integrity issues. And in the video, we're told that there is a confidential whistleblower that has sent friendlyjordies documents and photos, or photos of documents even, like this one here. There's a photo of a some kind of document, financial document. Here is a photo of an email that was sent to friendlyjordies by the confidential informant. Some more emails sent. And here we have photos that the confidential informant was sent to friendlyjordies and is being reported on in this video. So we have a video that is about alleged crime or political integrity issues, or both, arguably in the public interest, this topic. We have an informant, a confidential whistleblower or confidential informant that has given information, documents and photos to friendlyjordies, which they have published. So then the question is, if friendlyjordies or Jordan Shanks goes in front of a court, what will the judgment be? Will they be considered to be a journalist and therefore able to protect their sources, or will they be considered not a journalist and have no privilege of protecting sources as journalists have? That's the question. So where can we go to try and figure out if the law considers friendlyjordies or Jordan Shanks to be journalists? We can go to the Commonwealth Evidence Act. Here we have section 126J, division 1C, journalist privilege. So let's have a look at the privilege first. So if a journalist has promised the informant not to disclose the informant's identity, neither the journalist nor his or her employer is compelled to answer any questions or produce any documents that would disclose the identity of the informant or enable that identity to be ascertained. Now, it does go on to say that if the judge thinks that it's in a greater public interest to get the identity of the informant, then that privilege can be overruled. So what is the definition of journalist in the Act? So we've got this definition here. Journalist, a person who is engaged and active in the publication of news and who may be given information by an informant in the expectation that the information may be published in a news medium. So based on this definition, is friendlyjordies a journalist? Well, let's say Jordan Shanks engaged and active in the publication of news? Arguably yes. Maybe giving information by an informant? Yes, in that video, friendlyjordies were given information from an informant. Is YouTube a news medium, or more specifically, is friendlyjordies, the YouTube channel, a news medium? It's a bit of a interpretation needed, I guess. Now, luckily for us, there is an interpretation of what journalist means in this Evidence Act. Comes in the form of the federal court's case, the judgment of Kumova and Davidson. For a bit of background, in this case there was a Twitter user back when Twitter existed, and they said some things that were led them to be sued for defamation, and part of their defense involved the claims that they were doing journalism or a journalist. Oversimplifying here, but that's the gist of it. And so the judge then goes into quite a bit of detail about what does the definition of journalist mean, and is that person's Twitter account a news medium for the purposes of the Act. So in this judgment, Justice Flick gives a detailed interpretation of the definition of journalist in the Evidence Act. Interestingly, certain things are pointed out, like this this part here. So for the Evidence Act, the person does not need to be formally engaged in the profession or business as a journalist. So this kind of suggests that Friendly Jordies, Jordan Shanks, would be able to enter the definition. It also says that the journalist doesn't have to be paid for their work. So this part of the interpretation of journalists really kind of opens the door and allows for someone like Jordan Shanks to be considered a journalist for their work. In the judgment, Justice Flick compares the definition in the Commonwealth Act to the Victorian Act. He says here, it talks about the Victorian counterpart. And he goes into say that the Victorian Evidence Act makes explicit certain things that need to be considered when deciding if someone's a journalist or not. And the Commonwealth definition, it's implicit. So how does the Victorian Act differ from the Commonwealth? Well, to start with, it actually says that the person engaged in the occupation or profession of journalism. So that's a big difference. Whereas in the Commonwealth Act, the person does not need to be engaged in the occupation. But Justice Flick's mostly interested in the Victorian Act because it said here, regard must be had to the following factors. Okay, so following factors include things like whether a significant proportion of the person's professional activity is about collecting, preparing information that has the character of news. So basically collecting news and publishing news, or giving opinion or analysis on news and current affairs. Now this is kind of interesting too. So if you've seen the Friendly Jordies channel, you could argue that they are, significant proportion of Jordan Shanks' professional activity involves collecting and preparing information that is arguably news or current affairs. And in Friendly Jordies videos, there's also a lot of commenting or providing opinion or analysis of news and current affairs. So here, on consideration of these two factors, Friendly Jordies looks like they're going to qualify. Now here in the Victorian Act, this is something that Friendly Jordies might not, a hurdle they might not be able to clear. Okay, so the person or publisher of the information or analysis or comment is accountable to comply through a complaints process with recognized journalistic or media professional standards of codes of practice. Okay, so it could be, I guess, if Jordan Shanks is a MEAA member and subscribes to the MEAA Code of Ethics, maybe that would tick this box, or somehow subscribe to the Australian Press Council standards, possibly that. So in the Commonwealth Act, Justice Flick doesn't have to regard each of those points as it's worded in the Victorian Act. It says must have regard to these, but these can be used to help with the decision in the Commonwealth Act's case. And so a few things that are singled out by Justice Flick: regularly publishes news medium, complies with media standards. Now, having regard to professional standards or codes would inevitably involve regard being had to other factors. So it goes into a bit of detail here. So, and this is the thing that, these are the things that we can kind of see whether we can see them in Friendly Jordies video content or in the actions of Jordan Shanks. Fair and balanced manner. Okay, so this is a consideration. So we can go back and look at the video and see, is it done in a fair and balanced manner? What's one way of providing fairness and balance? It's giving the other person or the subjects of the story, a right to reply, opportunity to speak and respond to whatever the story is about. So in this video that we're looking at, did that happen? So we can see that it did happen. Emails like this sent out by the media outlet friendlyjordies asking for comments, replies, and where they were returned, they were published. So the replies were published, and where there was no reply given, it was made clear that the right of reply was given, but the person didn't respond. So arguably, we could say that there's evidence in this video, at least, of fairness and balance. The motive of the person creating the content, or the purpose, is signaled out as a factor to consider whether or not they're a journalist. Okay, is conveying the news the motivation, or something else, such as belittling another, as is mentioned here, would hardly be an indication of fairness. So, is that video belittling, or is the objective to belittle somebody, or is the objective to convey news? That's a question we can ask, and we can look in the content about that. So the Twitter account that was being analysed in this case described itself as cynical and cranky take on the ASX professional company manipulators. Okay, so in this, the judge ultimately decided that the self-description of the person was important, and it weighed on the decision of whether or not that person was a journalist. This self-description was seen to be very important, and the judge actually said it was at the very heart of the conclusion that this person was not a journalist, was the self-description of their of what they were doing. So we can go back to the friendlyjordies YouTube channel, and we can look at what their self-description is. So let's have a look here. Their about section says it's the biggest variety show in town, with all caps. Okay, so I'm not sure this is going to inform a judge in a positive way that the friendlyjordies is a journalist here. I mean, it's variety show could include news, I guess. Variety shows includes a variety of things. So another big important interpretation of the definition of journalist that comes out of this judgment is this one here. So a journalist is not somebody who only coincidentally publishes material which may be characterized as news. So regularity, publishing regularly, is a important deciding factor. And again, we can look at the friendlyjordies channel and have a quick look. Does the friendlyjordies channel regularly publish news, or something that could be described as news? So let's have a look here. No, no, no. Yes. Polls aren't looking good. No. I mean, yes. friendlyjordies is great at having cryptic and vague titles and thumbnails. No, yes, no, yes, no. Okay, so probably not. No, possibly. Political commentary, so yes. Okay, CMF, okay, yes. Now, so it looks like variety show could be very appropriate, but we could argue that friendlyjordies does regularly publish content that could be considered as news, but the mix, the overall mix, could also come into it. What percentage of the content is considered news or not? And again, why is this important? It's important as an example because in a possible future situation, an Australian YouTuber could publish information they receive from a confidential whistleblower, and they might be forced to either give up the identity of the person or resist giving up the identity of the person by arguing that they're acting as a journalist. So on the face of it, does friendlyjordies produce journalism? Looking at this video as an example of one that uses information from a confidential informant, arguably yes. But then when there are some considerations that a judge might go through in the interpretation of journalists, it gets a bit more tricky. The self-description of friendly Geordies could be a problem. The mix of different types of content could be a problem, although it could be argued that regularity of news or current affairs content it holds. Okay, so chances are that friendly Geordies could be considered a journalist under the Commonwealth Evidence Act. Now, though that's not guaranteed, and as I mentioned, it could be argued either way. But there's another thing we need to think about. The video content is about issues happening in Queensland, and there's a chance that there could be a court case in Queensland that falls under the Queensland Evidence Act. So let's have a look at that. So in the Queensland Queensland Evidence Act's definition of journalist, it's completely different. Here we can see that the definition of journalist is about a person being engaged and active in gathering and assessing information about matters of public interest, okay, so not just any old news, and preparing that information for publication. Again, in the Queensland Act, there are some factors that the judge can consider when interpreting the definition of journalist and deciding whether someone is or isn't a journalist. And it's a bit different to the Victorian Act. Also, it says here the court may consider the following, whereas in Victoria it says must. Regularity comes back. Okay, so is the content regular? Does the person comply with professional standards? Now, comply is interesting. So it doesn't necessarily say that they have to be, say, members of MEAA and with their code of ethics, but they could, through their actions, comply. So does this video have any evidence of complying with ethical standards? Arguably, redacting documents is an example of some kind of professional standard. Blurring out the face of people unrelated to the topic could be an example of ethical standards. And giving right of reply can be an example of having ethical standards. Ethical or professional standards. So let's go with professional. Ethical standards could be a bit different. So could friendly Geordies qualify as journalism under the Queensland Act? I think it's more likely than, say, the Victorian Act. So here, information of issues of public interest, you could argue yes. Of those issues of public interest, does friendly Geordies give information, provide comment or analysis or opinion on that? Arguably yes. Considerations, does friendly Geordies regularly publish this kind of stuff? Arguably yes, although the exact content mix of the channel you could look into. When creating video content, does friendly Geordies comply with recognized standards? When they publish their content, is their published content complying with recognized standards? This could be something that friendly Geordies could argue. It could be argued that their actions comply with whatever standards you want to compare them to, even if they're not members of a specific organization. So here we're using the Friendly Geordies channel and specifically one of those videos as a way of trying to understand what exactly the law thinks of journalists and whether or not YouTubers could apply. If you think there's another YouTuber that's worth looking at to see whether or not they're journalists under the law, let me know. If you're interested in other areas of the law that have conceptualizations of journalists, let me know as well. And it could be that in Queensland, under the Evidence Act, Friendly Geordies is a journalist, but under a different area of law, they're not a journalist. And there are lots of different areas of law that we could think about. Yeah, I hope that was mildly interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments.